Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Embassy of the State of Palestine in Sri Lanka, Mind Adventures Theatre Company and Stages Theatre Group, it is my honor to welcome you all here this evening to this sharing of the Gaza Monologues. And we are responding to a call by ASHTAR Theatre in Ramallah. They originated the Gaza Monologues. And there are 40 countries today staging this event on this day, the 29th of November, in solidarity with commemorating the International Day of Solidarity with the people of Palestine. So thank you so much for braving the weather and the humidity to be with us this evening. Just a couple of housekeeping rules and we will move on. First, may I remind you to check that your phone is on silent, please. Also, no flash photography. We don't want to blind the readers, but you can, of course, take photographs. If you are posting anything from this event on social media today, please use the hashtag Gaza Monologues as one hashtag. Don't break it up, just hashtag Gaza Monologues. We'd really appreciate it. And by using that hashtag, ASHTAR Theatre will be able to see how many people around the world are posting from these events. If it does rain again, we might stop the monologues if it gets like seriously ridiculous and you can't hear anything. So we will stop the monologues at that point and play you some pre-chosen music. That's quite lovely. Also, if you'd like to come around and fill this area and bring your chairs over as well, I recommend doing that now. Anything else? I think that's it, isn't it? Yes, oh yes. On behalf of Ruvin Tissera and myself, we'd like to take a moment to just thank our crew and our cast. This show came into being on Sunday night, and in just a very short time we've pulled this together, so our deep appreciation to everyone who has helped and the actors who have made this time. Thanks very much.
So, as you know, Gaza has been under siege since 2006. And in 2008, when it was first attacked, and there were about 1,400 people killed, of which 450 were children. ASHTAR Theatre, which is a theatre group in the West Bank in Ramallah, spoke to 33 young people in Gaza. They were all aged they were very young, between 11 and 16 years, and collected their testimonies, what it felt like to be children living in Gaza. Then this theatre group worked on these monologues, and we have these 33 pieces which constitute the Gaza Monologues. Now, the story of the Gaza Monologues doesn't stop there. There is tragedy and there is great power in the history of this piece of writing, because ironically, the authors of the monologues, the 33 children who wrote these monologues, could never ever perform these monologues outside of Gaza because they were never allowed to leave Gaza. So what ASHTAR Theatre did is that it created something very powerful out of that obstacle. And in 2010, it did two things that are quite remarkable. It set a date, October 17th, and sent out a worldwide call asking young people all over the world to perform the Gaza Monologues in lieu of the children who could not leave Gaza to perform this anywhere else. And on October 17th, 2010, 1,500 young people, approximately, all over the world, performed the Gaza Monologues in solidarity with the children who wrote it. Sri Lanka too did a performance of the Gaza Monologues. It was directed by Jay Koloff. The second thing that ASHTAR Theatre did in 2010 is that it actually took the Gaza Monologues to the UN, the General Assembly. This was in November, but here again, none of the children who wrote the monologues were allowed to leave Gaza. So 22 young people who had performed the monologues earlier performed them on behalf of the children of Gaza. Now it's 2023, and in the midst of this continuing horror and tragedy that has brought out the worst and the best in humanity, this is another reading, an offering that we are doing today, and it joins a collective of over 2,000 readings of the Gaza monologues that are happening today, as Tracy said, in 40 countries. So ours is just one in 2,000. So I like you to keep that in mind as you listen to these readings. This is not a performance. There is no way we can perform anything when we see the tragedy and the horror of what is happening in Gaza right now. Finally, before I hand you over to the actors, I'd like to read something that I came across. This is something by a young boy called Mohammed Abu Shaban. He was 11 years old when he wrote for the Gaza Monologues. In 2014, when he was 18 years old, Mohammed wrote this: I dream of having one day of safety. I am sure the world is too busy to remember our situation. 6 years have passed since we wrote our monologues, and we are still under siege. Mohammed Abu Shaban, if he is alive, would be 27 years old today. And 15 years have passed since he wrote that monologue as an 11-year-old boy. Let us bear this in mind, and let us respectfully listen to the words of the children of Gaza, speaking out for humanity in the worst of circumstances. Thank you very much.
My name is Ruvin Silva. I'll be reading a monologue by Ahmed Al-Ruzi from Al-Wahida Street. He's 15 years old. Before the war, I used to feel that Gaza was my second mother. Its ground was warm. It was the warm chest I could lay on. And its sky was my dreams, without limits. The sea would wash away my worries. But today I feel it's an exile. I stopped feeling it's the city of my dreams. In the war, the main electricity pole was hit by a huge rocket. All my uncles were at home with us, and the electricity went out. But there was another line working near to the house. I went to our neighbor and asked him for an extension so we could connect to the second line. Once we were connected and our house was lit, he came to take the extension back. We had a huge fight. In war, everyone thinks about themselves. During the war, a lot of people had 20 bags of flour and never had a shortage of gas, whilst others didn't have a piece of bread. They were asking their neighbors for bread, and they wouldn't give them any. Most people locked up their things under lock and key and decided not to give anything to anyone. But others were good and helpful. Back to our topic. We didn't agree to return the connection to him, even though it was his extension that we were using. And for the first time, I realized how bad we can be. We were punished on the spot. The house next to ours was bombed and split in 2 pieces. and half of it fell on us. We left the connection and electricity and everything and ran away to my uncle's house next to the municipal park. My uncle's house is close to a government building, and in the evening, people started saying that building would be bombed. And if it was bombed, my uncle's house might disappear from existence. We sat there not knowing what to do or where to go. My dad kept reassuring us, "Don't worry, don't be scared, nothing will happen." We stayed like that till midnight. We kept hearing rockets and explosions, and my dad kept saying, "Don't worry and don't be scared." But suddenly he said, "Follow me, we are going back home." And he started shaking. All of us started shaking with him. My mum started screaming, and my uncle was in really bad shape. Anyway, all of us ran away in the middle of the night with my uncle's family. We ran home, couldn't believe it when we got home. Till today, I don't remember where we slept or how. The important thing was that we were away from that building. We found that our neighbor had taken the electricity connection, and we spent the night in darkness while his house was lit. I felt he was right to take his connection back. After that, my dad got a connection complex. He bought 3 electric cables and 6 gas bottles, 2 electric pans, 20 neon lights, 20 pack of candles, 6 packs of cans, 10 packs of wires, 6 flashlights, and 2 boxes of batteries. We are living in war, and we have to be careful till things get better. I got a complex worse than all others. It's as though I was generous before the war, or maybe I didn't know the value of things because I couldn't believe that there would be a day when I wouldn't find a drink of water or a piece of bread. But after the war, I became super careful with everything and anything. I started barely sweetening my tea. And if I broke a loaf of bread, I wasn't allowed to finish it. I lost my appetite for food, and I became really economical. My dad says Ahmed always has his pocket money. Of course, because I take it and save it just in case there's another war. I feel like I'm married with 10 kids. I'm scared of life, of everything, of the smallest things, always worried. I feel that all of Gaza is sitting on moving sands. Any madness you can imagine can happen in a second in this place. And a lot of dreams may come true too. It's a strange city with no logic. China is now a third of the world, and they all work but can barely make enough shoes and shirts for Gaza. Gaza consumes everything, and the world attacks it, but it keeps pretending nothing is wrong. Actually, Gaza is full of poverty, and there are people who pick their food from the garbage. The tragedy is that things keep getting worse, and the biggest tragedy is that there's nothing to stop that happening. Every pit has a bottom, except Gaza. I dream of living one day in freedom, and I don't think that's a big dream, but it's hard to come true. My dream is also to end the Palestinian division, which is giving us schizophrenia. I'm tired of thinking, but I can't stop it. But we have to plead, and God will provide. And to you folks, goodbye.
My name is Hidaayath Hazeer, and I'm reading a monologue by Ahmed Taha at 12 years old, born in Al-Daraj. All my life I thought Gaza was the biggest and most beautiful city in the world. But once I went with my dad to Jaffa and came back with my head spinning. After that, I felt that Gaza was the size of a needle hole and wasn't beautiful. And it keeps getting smaller and worse. No one can breathe, and on top of it all, we are not allowed to travel. Every time I walk the streets of Gaza, I suffocate. Jaffa's picture won't leave my mind. I ask myself, where are we? We are so far from the rest of the world. That's why I'm always at the sea. Because I feel it's not from Gaza. I keep writing my name on the sand, and the waves come and erase it. Before the war, I wanted to be an electronics engineer. But since the war, I hate going to school. I feel I won't be anything important in my life, and even if I will, so what? It's all the same in this city. Am I going to be the prettiest flower on a garbage heap? When the bombing began, all the schools in Gaza went home except us. The principal wouldn't let us leave. The kids freaked out, and in a second, they went out into the schoolyard. The weird thing is that I'm in the Zaytouna school, the one near the Ministry of Passports, which got hit first. With the first hit, a piece of a rocket flew onto the biggest tree in the school and sliced it in two like a sugar cane. As soon as we saw that, no one stayed in school. Students, teachers, or the principal. We fled for our lives. I thought the only martyr that I would see in the war is the tree. But as soon as I got home, there were 4 martyrs in our street, as though waiting for me to say goodbye to them. When I was done with that, 3 more martyrs from the same family in our street arrived. As soon as we buried them and returned, our neighbor's house, 2 houses down the street, was bombed by the army, and the house was wiped off the ground. Everyone died. I felt most sad for the little girls. I felt the war was targeting me alone out of all the people in Gaza. All day I'd been seeing martyrs. In the Shifa hospital, I saw a sight that I will never forget. Hundreds of corpses, one on top of the other. Their flesh, their blood, and their bones all melting on each other. You wouldn't know the woman from the man or even the child. Piles of flesh on the beds, and lots of people screaming and crying, not knowing where their kids are, their men or their women. That night, I came home from hospital and was awake till morning from fear. I thought that it would only be that night that I couldn't sleep, but till today, I see them in front of me and I can't sleep.
My name is Darren Tissera. I'm reading a monologue from Ashraf Sosi, 14 years old, from Al-Veda Street. All the neighborhood kids loved him. He was calmer than a breeze. He would take his pocket money from my father and give it to me. Everyone loved him. His friends came and he went with them to school. They went out running, like butterflies flying off the ground, like the world was created for them. The Israeli planes were in the air. The sound of the helicopter was like a monster waiting to pounce on its prey. A car of wanted men was driving along Yarmouk Street, and the butterflies were near the car. The butterflies didn't know that this car would be the fire that would burn them. A rocket fell on the car. My brother Tariq flew 5 meters off the ground. He flew higher than the car, then came down walking. Nothing was the matter with him. The ambulance came and took the corpses. People told him to get into the ambulance, but he told them, "Nothing is the matter with me." And he kept going to school. 100 meters later, he put his hand on his heart and fell down, a martyr. I was in the street waiting for the school bus, and my sister told me to see what's going on. I did, but I didn't see Tariq, and I went on to school. While I was in class, my uncles came and told me, "You will take 3 days off school." I didn't suspect anything. We got in the car. My uncle told the driver to turn off the news. Then I started getting suspicious. My uncle loves the news. We got home, and there was a big crowd of people around. Before I went down, I saw my father sitting on the chair, crying. It was the first time I saw my father cry, and he was holding the picture of my brother, Tariq. I asked him, "Dad, was my brother martyred?" He said, "God have mercy on his soul." The ambulance brought him from the hospital. We all ran to him to say goodbye. He was sleeping like an angel, with the book that he'd been carrying still in his hands. My father refused to let us go with him to the cemetery, but I got in the car and I went and said goodbye to him and read the Fatiha prayer on his grave. I kept going for 3 months every day to sit at his grave and talk to him. At night, I stare at his picture in the room with "The Hero Martyr, Tariq" written on it. Since my brother was martyred, I got used to sleeping in the bed alone. We used to sleep on top of the other, legs on top of heads. Sometimes it felt like our limbs were jumbled together. But today, I have a bed by myself. I'll never forget my brother.
My name is Thanuja Jayawardene. I'm reading a monologue by Allah Hajjaj, 12 years old, from Al-Shujaya. I feel like running in the streets till my headscarf flies in the sky and I fly after it. Sometimes I feel like being totally crazy, but I can't. It's the first time I say things like this. Maybe they're not the things I say, or maybe they're the things that I can't express, or I'm scared to express. Why do my parents treat me like this? I look at girls my age, how they're living their lives, and I envy them. I wish I could be like them in their confidence and their freedom. I wish a ship would carry me to a distant island and throw me on its shore, far away from the world, from everything, especially the war. Speaking of the war, all the war was one pile and Mum was the other. I'll never understand why my mum kept describing things to me that I'd already seen. She and I were standing on the balcony. They bombed our neighbor's house, and one of the neighbors died. We saw how the house was destroyed and how the corpse flew onto the street. And you can imagine what happened to the family next. Did it end? No, it didn't. Mum started telling me about how our neighbor's house was bombed and how our neighbor flew from the house, like she was talking to someone who hadn't been standing there. And on it went. Stories from Mum all through the war. And I was the only listener. We'd be sitting watching TV, and they would say there was bombing or destruction in some place. The report would be 15 minutes long, but Mum's repeat report would be 2 hours. She'd talk about the report like I hadn't been with her. I started to doubt myself. Had I been sitting with her or not? I swear I was there. I was really there. I was sitting next to her. Anyway, thankfully Mum isn't with you, otherwise she'd give you a headache with her stories.
My name is Tracy Jayasinghe, and I'm reading a monologue by Ahab Elian. He's 14 years old, and he's from Al-Saftawi Street. From when I first became aware of the world, I've had limited thinking. Life for me was to be born, grow up, get married, have kids, work, raise them, feed them, educate them, marry them off, and then die. But after the war, I found that life is much harder than that. It turned out that every small step we take has a million knots behind it. I'm scared of not finding work when I grow up, because wherever I go, I see men sitting in front of their houses with nothing to do. It's what scares and saddens me the most. That's why kids in Gaza took responsibility and were denied their childhood since birth. My mother always used to say, Ahab is the best one of my kids, because I was always at home, never had any problems. When the war started, my father locked us up at home because of how scared he was for us. 2 hours later, I was bored. I went out to walk around our house. But this time, the walk was different. I was afraid to walk near the cars in case they were bombed. And all the time, I kept looking up at the sky in case a plane would come and bomb me without me knowing it. I was terrified, even though the Saftawi district didn't see a lot of activity. I went back home running as though from something terrifying and stayed at home till the war was over. After the war, my life changed a lot. My relationship with people and the neighbors improved. I became known to the men of the neighborhood and started playing checkers with the old people. I started spending all my time outside the house. Can't stay inside for a minute. And my mother stopped saying, Ahab is the best one of my kids. I discovered that I didn't exist before the war. But after the war, here I am. God protect me. In the city, breathing its air, singing, dancing, and crying with it. And life is rolling onwards.
My name is Piorina Fernando, and I will be reading a monologue from Thamir Najem, 15 years old, from Ash Sheikh Radwan. Gaza is a matchbox, and where the matches inside it. When the war started on Gaza, all the media was focused on us. Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and all the satellite channels were focused on Gaza, and the occupation wouldn't leave us alone. The whole world became busy with Gaza and what's happening in it. Suddenly, Al Jazeera wrote, "Breaking news, death of Muhammad al-Hindi." And it wasn't normal because that Muhammad, he's my uncle, my mother's brother. It was the first time I see the screaming move from live broadcast on TV to the house. Screaming and yelling and tears. all of it, mixed up together, and it moved from our house to the street, and my mum fainted. A while later, the phone rang. It was my second uncle calling to tell us that Muhammad was martyred. He didn't know that the whole world knew the news. That's television. It's awful. Before a person is shot, as the bullet is on its way to his chest, the television has already broadcast the news. But these days, all the channels are sitting idle, praying to God to send another war on Gaza so they have work. Anyway, we all started crying bitterly for my uncle and remembering him and talking about him. We kept talking about him for a long time. Then it started getting less because death became normal in Gaza. After the war, I stopped caring whether I live or die. After what we saw in the war, I don't care about anything because I think each day I live is the biggest bonus, and all the life I live after the war is extra because I could have died at any second. You know, I'm sick of the city even though I love it. And I'm sick of the people too. Sometimes I feel that I know the 1.5 million who are in Gaza. There's nothing new. The same day is repeated every day. I feel like traveling, like changing scene and faces. As soon as I wake up every morning, I see the electricity pole in my face. I wish I'd wake up one day and not find it there. Each day, Abu Ibrahim stands at the door of the supermarket, and Abed, the bean seller, is selling his beans. And Abu El Abed is sitting at the door of his house, afraid that his house would run away. Ibrahim is standing with Hassan. I know the taxi drivers one by one. I know who takes you to the city and who goes to the beach. It's soul draining. The only hour that's different in my life is the one when I come to the theatre practice. It became my works and my mission. I wait for it impatiently. Without the theatre, I would have gone crazy. When I grow up, I want to be a big actor. I've loved acting since I was a kid. But any institution that I used to go to when I was a kid threw me out in a few days later. But this time, it's different.
My name is Lihan Mendis, and I will be reading a monologue by Sujud Abu Hussein, born 1995, in Sheikh Radwan. What I love most in Gaza is people's kindness and simplicity. And what I hate most is the political party fanaticism. Sometimes I feel that there's a contradiction between all this love and kindness that people have and this evil that controls the surface. If it was in my hands, I'd solve the problem of the Palestinian division tomorrow. In the war, they assassinated a big Hamas leader. All the media in the world covered the incident. But the whole world was in one valley, and we were in the other. Because Modi and Saluma, my young brothers, and Dad, had gone to our land that's next to the Hamas leader. We called them 1,000 times, and as usual, the Jawal mobile lines wouldn't go through, which stressed us out even more. Mum started pacing the balcony like a small bird from whom they've taken her children. She imagined that the balcony would somehow rescue Modi and Saluma and Dad. I was really stressed. I started crying and I went down to my aunt. My aunt started soothing me. She lied to me and told me that she had called them and spoken to them. I knew that she had not talked to them, but she was holding me and crying, and I was crying too. When I went up to our house, I saw that Mum was still pacing the balcony. I forgot to tell you that Modi and Saluma are 5 and 7 years old. They used to sleep in my arms, and my soul was connected to them. I felt at the time that my soul was going to escape and I would die. And honestly, only then, I felt that there was a war on Gaza, because I was busy with the computer all the time, and that day was the first time I lived the war. An hour later, there was knocking on the door of our house, and Dad came back with Modi and Saluma. As much as I loved them, this was the first time I felt how much they were really dear to me, how much I couldn't bear to be parted from them. I put them on my lap and kissed them like it was the first time I'd held them. And Mum stopped pacing the balcony, and it was the first time I felt that she loved Dad like this. After the war, I started thinking, why are we like that out of the whole world? They took our land and threw us out of our homes. And because we are defending ourselves, all this happens to us. There's no water, no electricity, no phones, no petrol. What are we to the world? Aren't we human?
My name is Andre Howson. I'm reading a monologue from Muhammad El Umrani, age 13, from Al Sujaya. Gaza, the warm arms and the fires of hell. Horror, fear, death, and destruction. But this time our area was safe. Every time the occupation attacks, they hit us first. But it looks like this time they got bored of our area and wanted to make some change. So we got lucky. I used to spend the whole day sitting on a chair, watching people running away from their houses towards the borders, carrying their belongings, sons, daughters, and going west. Some of them were carrying their kids on their shoulders. Others, their mothers on their backs. Where they were going, you don't know, till all of Gaza got squeezed into one area. Then the distance became tighter, and they started running away from the mosque. And it got tighter and tighter till they got to our house. I said to my father, "What? Is it our turn now? But where are we going to?" My dad insisted that we stay at home and said, "A person who leaves his house loses his dignity." And I said to myself, "Kid, stay put. You're not better than the others, and whatever happens, happens." All day, I would busy myself with food. And sometimes we'd go fill water with my cousins from the pipes in the streets. It was about 1,000 meters away from our house. So we used to take the donkey cart of Sabri. Him and his brother used to come with us to help. All the way he would tell us about his heroic acts and his horse and how he would go to the wilderness and hunt birds with a slingshot. I never carried a slingshot. It's scary. But the stories were nice, and in those days, entertaining despite our fear. We used to talk so as to lessen our fear from being in the streets. When daytime was over and night came, we would say, "The night has come with its worries." We couldn't even sleep. I used to be able to sleep for 15 minutes and then stay awake for 3 hours. How can you sleep with the bombing going on? And we're lying in bed, waiting for our fate. Sometimes I'd look at the sky from the edge of the window and find the world so red with fire and smoke everywhere. And I'd ask myself, why is the whole world at rest and we're living in an inferno?
My name is Nabeel Nooramith. I'll be reading a monologue by Abu Shaban. He's 11 years old and he's from Al Rimal. You're going to call me crazy, nuts, cuckoo, go ahead. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me anymore. In truth, what's happening with me is not normal. I mean, losing trust in my friends is normal. Lots of people have lost trust in others. But what's driving me crazy is that I've lost my trust in shop windows and cars, in police stations and suspicious areas. In my personal philosophy, all of Gaza is a suspicious area. To make a long story short, everything that was hit in the war, I'm scared of going near today. I don't know how to walk down the street. I'd be walking on the right and get scared, and then I'd move to the left, but I'd be scared. So I'd go to the right and stay in this whirlwind. Where am I supposed to walk? In the middle of the street? See, on the first day of the war, I was in my brother's shop that sells computers and mobile phone accessories. A medal fell on the floor, and my brother told me to hang it up. Suddenly, while hanging it up, I heard the sound of rockets, and the glass fell on me and injured me. I was scared. I wasn't scared for myself, but for my brother. He was also injured. He was worried about our family. He told me, go up to the house and make sure they're okay. I went up the stairs, and I wasn't scared. I made sure they were all right. And they were all fine, thank God. I walked up the street to find out where the explosion happened. We heard a lot of explosions. Gaza became like a black night because of the smoke. But still, I wasn't scared. I forgot to tell you that my brother had a cup of tea in the morning on the explosion, which fell from his hand and broke. Do you think it was because of the fear?
My name is Murthaaz Bari. I'm reading the monologue of Mahmoud Balawi, who's 13 years old, from the ASHTAR camp. I want to write the most beautiful words about Gaza, but I can't. I can't not see the poverty, siege, and famine. Especially when all Gaza City flooded into Al Arish and emptied it from all goods in 2 hours. I can't not see the deprivation in every house, the fear and the sickness. What do you want me to say about Gaza? From when I became aware of it, I was sad about everything inside it. Especially the kids and even the adults, youth, women, girls, animals, stones and trees. Everything in it is crying. I'm looking for nice words to say and I can't find them. The sea. The sea is the only thing that helps me dream. When I stand on the shore, I can imagine Cyprus, travel to Paris, fly to Rome, all while standing in the same spot. I go around the whole world, and in the end, I land on my bed in our house in the middle of the refugee camp. I go back to the reality of Gaza. The dirty market, overflowing sewage, the carts and what's on top of the carts, the suffocating smell and the silent people who can't speak. When I look at the clock and it's 11:55, I start shaking and my heart beats faster. I feel that the war started again. Not only the clock scares me, everything that flies does, even the flies. I can't tell anyone about my fear so they don't call me a wimp or a sissy. I'm most scared for my older brothers. When a fly lands on any of them, I feel it's going to kill them. I start shouting and I run away from the place. That's why I'm now escaping outside the house all the time. because of the many flies.
My name is Hajarah Faleel, and I will be reading for Yasmina Jarur, aged 12, from Al-Daraj. Our future in Gaza is obscure and unknown, like a calm volcano that will erupt at any second. As if we're on a boat without a captain in the midst of a raging sea, we go right and left and no one knows where to lean. I hear that in other countries, childhood is sacred, and children live their lives without problem and fear. But Gaza's children are forgotten and outside the picture. They're the ones who feel injustice the most because society treats them like they're not kids. When it wants, it makes them adults, and when it wants, it returns them to being children. And most people deal with them like they're only bodies, not minds. When I see a child peddling in the street or working in a shop, I imagine how the children of the world are playing and resting and feeling safe. Honestly, my heart breaks for them, and sometimes I cry. Gaza has no tenderness and no childhood. A boy is born a man here, and a girl is born a bride. Dad, before the war, was a lot more tender with me. I wish he would take me in his arms like before. But God help him, he's probably worried too. Because in the war, we lost 5 dunams of land in a second. The field, that's 60 years old, was hit by a rocket from the Israeli army, which burned all the oranges in it. My father, my brother, and myself could have also died by that rocket because we were close to the window. If Dad hadn't thrown me to the ground, all the shrapnel would have hit me. After I visited Rafah crossing and saw the flags of Palestine and Egypt next to each other, yet separated by a wire, I felt the difference between the 2 flags, and that this wire is the border of this big prison that we live in. I felt how stupid and unjust is the world. And I felt like breaking all borders and ending all differences between races and religions so that everyone in the world would be brothers. My dream became to live in a safe country, even in a small village, in a distant land, at the end of the world.
My name is Shala Amarasuriya. I'll be reading a monologue by Yasmin Abu Amar from Al-Shujaya. She's 12 years old. I want to be a specialist in the science of metaphysics, what is behind nature. You know why? Because I think that Gaza itself is being nature. And I got so much from my presence here in Gaza that I'd like to transfer my skill to others. The Shujaya camp is always the center of events. Each time the occupation wants to invade Gaza, they pass by our house. When the war began, people left their houses thinking that the Shujaya should be hit. It's normal in this case to leave our houses. Everyone was calling my dad to convince him to leave the house. My brothers from Algeria, my uncles from the States, my uncles from Ankara, to leave the Shujaya. 3 days with my mum, having packed the house stuff, and we're in suspended travel mode. We want to go to my sister's house because it's safer there. After we were exhausted from talking, he agreed and said, "You go and I'll follow." How can we go and leave him? My mum was smart. She left the bread at home. And you know how dear bread was in the war. As soon as we got to my sister's house, she called him and said, "Salman, we forgot the bread. Bring it for us." And Salman fell in the trap and brought the bread, and we wouldn't let him leave. The next morning, we woke up to a phosphorus bomb that fumed the street. We all started crying, our tears falling because of the phosphorus. The bomb was easier on us than Dad's taunting. He said, "I told you, let's stay home. It's better for us. There's no place like home." And on it went. What added fuel to the fire is that the mosque and the house next to my sister's house were destroyed in the bombing. And you can imagine what my dad did to us. He wanted to take us back home immediately. No sooner had he finished his words than we were told that the house next to us in Shujaiya was bombed and the front of our house ripped off. Then, for the first time, all of us looked at Dad. We stayed at my sister's place. It became clear to us that wherever we were in Gaza, in the war, we were not safe. After the war, I started to always dress in a very clean and tidy way, so that if I die, I would die a nice death. But it would be the biggest problem if I was hit by a rocket, because I'd become 100 pieces. And I'd like to die in one piece. Wow. Gaza and Gaza's dreams. Our dream has become to die a good death, not live a good life.
That brings us to the end of our selection of monologues. We didn't read all 33. We read a few of them. I'd like to thank the Embassy of Palestine for giving us this space, the ambassador and the deputy ambassador and the staff, and for always making this space available to Sri Lankans who wish to come and seek each other's solidarity and also look for ways to show solidarity with the peace-loving people of this world who are requesting an immediate ceasefire and an end to genocide, apartheid, occupation, and the restoration of the Palestinian people to a life full of dignity, freedom, and peace. I'd like to invite the cast on stage, not for an applause, but I'd like us, if you can all come here, guys, I'd like us all to stand up and maintain 2 minutes silence in honor of the children, young people, women, elderly, men, and all the civilians of Gaza, and the people of the West Bank, and the millions of Palestinians who cannot enter their country, stateless refugees outside of Palestine. 2 minutes silence, please.